Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of a fairly substantial issue and with major implications of the Supreme Court in the United States overturning or limiting, maybe is a better way of putting it, President Trump's trade tariffs that he's placed on various countries and various goods and items using executive authority to do it and citing emergency necessity. So this worked its way through the legal system, and of course it reached the Supreme Court. The pro-globalist groups opposing Trump, in fact opposing anything he does, they were very active here and we're trying to, and then of course when SCOTUS did overturn, again it was a limited overturning, but overturning nonetheless, Trump's decisions there on tariffs. They, those who Trump derangement syndrome people, they were and still are gloating over it all. But I wanted to go into the weeds of this because I think that is relevant. And now the judgment or judgments, plural, agreeing and dissenting judgments, and it was 6-3, and there were the three anti-Trump judges that were, would have voted against Trump no matter what, and so for the remaining 6, it was a 3-all sort of thing, 3 sides. So it was hardly a unanimous decision based on the facts. The other three anti-Trump ones would have voted ideologically anyway. But so we need to put that in some perspective, that the judges that were passing, P-A-R-S-I-N-G, passing the law and its implications, its meaning, its interpretations, they were split exactly down the middle on this, and that too needs to be understood. Now, it came down to really a couple of interpretations here. Is a tariff a tax? And if it is a tax, how is it a tax? So that was a very critical interpretation that and again, it's pushing, I think, 200 pages, and I haven't read the whole thing, by the way, but picking out what I think are the key bits. The judges that decided against the tariffs, or Trump's executive authority to levy these tariffs, argued that the tariff was in fact a tax. Now, I do follow their reasoning, but you could quibble over whether it's a tax or not, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But I do understand the reasoning. So if you say or accept that a tariff is a tax, then only Congress has the power to levy taxes, and that's not a bad thing in itself. Should taxes be initiated by executive authority alone? I would say not, or for a limited time, like you can only tax for a short time. Now, the Trump team declared it was an emergency, thus that gave the president the authority to levy, in this case, or to place tariffs on there during these emergency powers. Now, the emergency, or the level of emergency, or the scale of emergency, was also quibbled over. Was it actually an emergency? If so, what scale of emergency? And is this an ongoing, never-ending thing that do you say it's an emergency that lasts forever, or it lasts for a year or 5 minutes or whatever it is? So that was also a point of quibbling. Who gets to determine emergency and how long it lasts, and indeed what authority that would therefore, by extension, what authority would that provide the office, the executive, this is the office of the president, to levy these tariffs? So now it came down on both, came out negative, I guess, on both sides there, that the president doesn't have open-ended executive authority to declare emergencies, then act on, in this case, tariffs. And as the tariffs caused an increase, and this was theoretical, and I would quibble over this, caused an increase in the price of goods, imported goods, this is, whether from China or wherever, as these tariffs cause an increase in price, the certain justices in the court said, well, what it is therefore a tax or tantamount to a tax. And if we say it's a tax, then the president does not have the authority to levy taxes, therefore does not have the authority to put the tariffs. And again, that's a point of quibbling. Again, I do see their reasoning, but I would quibble over whether it is a tax or should be simply declared as one by the court, in as far as the citizens have to pay and it raises revenue, it is thus a tax. Again, you could quibble on that point. Now, coming back to the architecture of what President Trump's administration was trying to do, they were looking at countries where there was a substantial imbalance in trade, where China, we'll use China as an example. China was buying $1 of American goods for every $10 of goods that they were selling to America. Now, some of this is caught up in the offshoring and factory closures, Rust Belt, and all sorts of other things going into that wider narrative there. But the fact remains there was a huge trade imbalance. So President Trump policies. So we want to address this trade imbalance because it's ruining America financially and in other ways. And so we want industry, manufacturing, particularly the value-add manufacturing, to come back to the United States and to make it worthwhile for businesses to invest in the United States, and factories and businesses, and training and skills, hiring, creating jobs, that sort of thing. That's an eminently worthwhile endeavor. And I don't know how else you're going to do it other than placing tariffs. So you can use import quotas, and I think the president could probably still do that, actually, if my interpretation of the Supreme Court ruling or my understanding of it is accurate. So a quota meaning that okay, if you want to import X sort of ABC item from China, you're only allowed to bring in 100 units a year. And so that's a quota. You're only allowed to bring in 100 units a year. Or another way of reducing the trade deficit, of course, is tariffs, which Trump has already tried. So the placing of the tariffs was to rebalance or bring some balance to the trade equation, where the country's buying fuck all from America but selling shitloads to America. A lot of it, low quality, peasant-made goods. So the Trump team was looking at where are the trade imbalances, and let's use tariffs to rebalance them. I've got no problem with that at all. I think that's a sensible and it's a good idea, a worthwhile idea, a practical idea, and one that delivers benefits to the United States. And we need to remember that President Trump is the president of the United States and is there representing the American people in America for America, and thus the American economy and so on. So the president of the people has every right to take measures and action to improve the lives of the people, and addressing these trade imbalances was one of these ways. The same goes for, say, the European Union, where more was being sold to America than they were buying from America. So I see the tariffs and saw the tariffs as quite reasonable, sensible, and practical. I didn't see a problem with it. But I didn't see it as a tax, and the globo leftists were already months ago, a year ago, and so I figured it would have to be adjudicated on by a court, in the Supreme Court in this case. But I wasn't sure they would be successful in pushing the tax argument. But anyway, there have been, and that's it. Not that there aren't other ways for the president to act. Again, I mentioned quotas and things like that. But until the credit worthiness of America means they suck in goods from around the world, that needs to be addressed no matter how you look at it. And as in, the debt piling up can't go on, a trade deficit type debt can't indefinitely go on forever. So at some point it's going to have to be dealt with, and might as well be done this way. Now, if the value add, particularly the value add manufacturing, all comes back to the United States, it'll create many millions of jobs, and better paid jobs, advanced technology jobs, creating demand for advanced skills, and technical colleges to train people, virtuous cycles and circles of skills and production and jobs, tax being paid, yada yada yada. A lot of benefits there. So the President Trump, I think, is already moving into, if you like, a Plan B situation. But I guess the disappointing side is when the president took this executive action on tariffs. I mean, if I was, in part of the Trump team, I would have energetically gone and lobbied Congress, the Republicans in Congress, say, look, we need legislation to back this, back the president. The executive order's only got so much power, only for a certain amount of time, and we need Congress to pass laws that support or underwrite the president's executive action. So you guys need to get to work now, and I'd be getting on to the Mike Johnsons and all the people there to say, look, get this together. This is important, because at some point this will be overturned, modified, reduced, or whatever, which of course has come to be the case. But nothing happened. The Republican Congress just didn't do anything there, and I think that was a major, in my view, that was a major failing, and they fucked up. And they should have acted on this with urgency and dispatch, and they didn't. So my thing is here that the opportunity hasn't gone. The horse hasn't completely bolted, but Congress now needs to act. And I'm not seeing any signs, but maybe there are. Maybe there's a lot of backroom conversations and lots of arm twisting going on. All this sort of stuff. Maybe it's going on, but it's certainly not obvious from where I'm sitting, but it needs to be done. And this creates a sort of a geopolitical realignment that China is only getting rich over outsourced jobs from the United States. China's not getting rich because they're great inventors or innovators, and the European Union is committing economic and social suicide at pace. And why should they be propped up by American consumers? So there's a whole lot of things that in the mix here, and Trump placing tariffs also as retaliation for, say, backsliding on other agreements that a country might make. For example, Mexico failing to get the cartels under control. Trump threatening tariffs on Mexico. Now, this is not exactly how tariffs have been used in the past, but actually they have been, but they've been quietly done in the back room. For example, America can lean on a country to say, well, you better do this. We want you to do that. We want you to have gay pride parades down the main street. We want you to, promote black lesbians into position. America pre-Trump was using all of these devices and threatening trade sanctions and numerous other sanctions, denying access to the banking system. All sorts of threats were being made in the back room, but none of these were coming out into the international sort of media. There was no hysterical media screaming articles going, America threatens this or that unless black lesbians are pointed at death. There wasn't any of that. The media were completely on board with it. When Trump wants to unwind some of that and uses, again, trade as a device, which has always been used, by the way, or used for a long time, then suddenly it's a headline item and he's a bad guy and it's going to upset the international order and rules-based system. There's never a fucking rules-based system. There's always backroom strong-arming. So anyway, that's where it's at. So it came down again to two things. What's an emergency, and to what extent does the executive, Trump in this case, have the power to declare an endless emergency? And secondly, is it a tariff, a tax? And if a tax, it can only be put in place by Congress. I wouldn't say this is a disaster, this decision. It just means Congress, the Republicans in Congress need to get this shit together. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.